Hello, welcome to this demonstration. This is a color study and it was done in 47 minutes, sped up 300% so that the video is only 16 minutes. The camera absolutely sucks, so I do apologize for that. I did not realize how much the camera jumps in and out of focus until I had to watch this. And after working an hour on this, I did not want to do another color study after. I'm just using this. Also, one corner of this picture has a really bad reflection in it. I did my best to try and edit the reflection down as much as possible, but you'll see in the photo below that it definitely looks very different. Now, again, the canvas is 11 by 14. It's a canvas panel. You can buy 5 of those for $7.50 at Michael's if you have a Michael's near you. $7.50 on Amazon or $10 on Amazon, probably at most. But canvas panels are really great, affordable, and throwaway. You do not have to make precious pictures on them at all. They're very inexpensive. So it's absolutely worth your while to pick some up and then paint as many color studies as you can without the intent of painting something that you need to sell. The idea of a color study is to truly learn about your subject matter. As in this case here, we have this picture of Dagobah, and we have a moisture vaporizer as the subject matter with a building next to it, the dome building, that's kind of also in focus. The little door, in fact, is more in focus than any of the other stuff because of its high contrast, but that will be the area of focus. Now, it's not about focus in this picture, it's about color. Matching the colors, understanding the environment, understanding the temperature relationships between the lit side and the shaded side of the picture. The picture is started in ultramarine blue and it's cut back with some white, so it's not right out of the tube ultramarine blue. It is lightened up a little bit. Too dark, and then you have a dark line to contend with that shouldn't be there. At least these values are close to what the shadows are on the buildings. Why blue? Because blue is the sky, and the sky lights everything up outside of where the sun is directly lighting things. Like on the dome, only a small portion of the dome is directly lit by the sun. All the rest of it is a combination of the sun and the sky. The border or the frame of the picture is within the canvas. I'm not painting all the way out to the edges. That's to prevent the painting from becoming a messy picture. Painting all the way out to the edges, then the edges bump stuff and leave paint behind, and this is keeping everything nice and clean. Also, because the canvas or the composition was smaller within the canvas, as you saw, I needed to make an adjustment to the composition to allow for a little bit more room, and it's easy to do that, to grow the composition from the original because it isn't all the way out to the edges. Next is the sky. Since it's all the way in the background, it's a good idea to put it in. Now there are 3 different bands of temperature falling from the sky as well. From the left to the right, it is brighter on the left side, it is darker on the right. Darker on the top, lighter on the horizon. The paint that's up on the top is ultramarine blue. The paint that's in the middle is cobalt blue. The paint that's at the bottom is cerulean blue mixed with a little yellow orange to make it a dusty atmosphere, like the sand is kicking up into the sky a little bit as we would see on the horizon. Now I should have put the shadows in next, but instead I painted the sand. I've pre-mixed everything as you can see in the photo above, so it doesn't really matter where I begin or what order I put things in, knowing that I've mixed everything close to the value that they should be. However, if I am demonstrating appropriately, then the shadows should have gone in next. The sand would have gone in after the shadows, which you'll see me put in. As soon as all of the ground is filled in with some sand color, I immediately go to those shadows. The sand is done with cadmium yellow, orange, and white, with some red rose mixed in with it, and cadmium red light and cadmium yellow orange mixed together with some white to tint it. Nothing is straightforward out of the tube. Nothing is just one color. Everything has been tinted or adjusted with some kind of other hue. All of the shadows are put in. There are 2 different temperatures for these shadows. There is the temperature of the shadow with sky mixing with it, And then there is shadow without sky mixing with it. That would mean the local colors. So a little more warmth for part of it and a slightly bluer version for the sky areas. And that's as the gradation goes further and further away from the contact point, it's going to have more and more blue sky in it. You can see I'm putting in some of the blue over there to add the gradient to those shadows. Continuing on with those shadows, I'm filling in the buildings now. I'm filling in the sides of the buildings. You'll see two different temperatures here as well. The planes facing towards us and the planes facing towards the other building. The planes facing toward the other building will have warmth in them. The planes facing towards us will be cooler. On this side of the building, because we're closer to this particular building, and because there is something else outside of our view reflecting light into it, there is more warmth within that shadow than what we see on the other side of those particular buildings. They do appear a little bit cooler because there are planes facing towards us and planes facing towards the other building, but they're very narrow. This side, it's a very large, broad plane. Because it's a color study, I'm going in and putting in all the gradations as needed. I'm not waiting for a certain point when I have all of the flat areas filled. I'm kind of doing everything at once. I have the reference to work from. I have all of the colors pre-mixed. It makes sense that I can go ahead and do all of this. Now, the most important thing that I'm making sure of is that the value structure remains the appropriate value structure. The lights feel light in comparison to the shadows, and the shadows feel dark enough that it makes the lights work. Then there's the temperatures, making sure that everything on the lit side stays warm, and making sure that everything on the shadow side stays cooler, but also making sure that there's some hint of the local color and some reflected lights in them. I think I mentioned it earlier that this study only took 47 minutes. Now I say only. They shouldn't take you any more than an hour to do at most. You are not working on precious shape matching and drawing and rendering. You're just matching colors. That's all you're doing. And I've actually already finished the exercise by pre-mixing. I know that they're not all accurate 100%, but they're pre-mixed, and my eye has already learned the color value of everything that I see in the picture, making it so much easier to connect with it once I start the painting. Then once this color study is done, how much more effective it'll be when I go to do the finish, because I've familiarized myself with the color harmonies and the color relationships. I understand how to build the picture, and it basically paints itself at that point because I've already familiarized myself with the drawing, the subject matter, the lighting, the color composition. All of those things are sort of memorized, and now it's easy to finish. Now, before I put in what we would call the small nuances or details, I want to make sure that all of the bigger areas have been blocked in to some extent. As you can see, now I'm blocking in the wall. And I have three different color temperatures to work with. I have the blue sky, I have a medium warm, which has more red in it, and then I have the sunlight warm, which is cadmium yellow pale, cadmium yellow orange, and the titanium white mixed with each other. And the titanium white is tinted high enough to make all of them the same value when I make each one of those colors. Then I can use them for, as you can see here, putting the light behind the wall in the front so that you can see the separation between the two of them. Turning the dome, we can see the temperature changes as they turn. And then pushing the walls back into space, cooling them off as they go further back. All of those are a part of that lit side. It's not just one simple color. It's several working in conjunction with each other at the same time. Now I'm putting in the moisture vaporizer, and it's in the foreground. I needed some of the background elements to be painted first so that when I do paint this in, it's getting placed on top of the background instead of painting the background up to it. And there are some instances where I'll be putting in the background after the fact, but I'd like more of the effect to feel like the paint that I've already painted is truly behind this object because I've painted these brush strokes over the top of them, which does make them go behind. Now, I think at this point I was talking about there's still some light spots left in the picture that I need to fill. Once all of those areas are filled in, I can make adjustments. Adjustments are very difficult to make when two things are apparent. One, the white of the canvas or a lot of holes in the picture, and two, the outline color. Because it is not the natural color of anything, that blue hue really stands out a lot and makes things difficult to adjust or make sense of because something is in that space that shouldn't be there. And so it's throwing things off optically, which then screws our head up a little bit as to what to do. So as you can see here, what I'm trying to do is fill in all the other spaces that are really annoying, or wrong word, I would say difficult to make adjustments to the smaller things and need to be removed so that I don't have those distractions causing me to make mistakes rather than look, figure it out, match it, make it work all at once. I also want the sky behind the moisture vaporizer to be a little more cleaned up because when I put in the brush strokes for it, they're going to be a brush stroke width. I'm using a bristle brush, not a sable, so it's already nice and sturdy. It's going to help me put colors down, but I want to make sure that there aren't any holes that will compete with what I do because the edges are going to be as light as the background holes. Basically like a whitish hue. Not white, but very light. Any of those holes in the background will compete with whatever little nuances I put in. I'm using the very corner of the flat brush to make all these little sharp edges. Rotated it onto its side, and I'm running it parallel to the surface, so I'm not scraping paint off and then replacing it. I'm laying paint over the top of the paint that's already there. Now the moisture vaporizer jumps forward a little bit more, and the background feels like it's behind it. Here I'm putting in a little bit of the background around it, but those are such small bits that they don't break the illusion at all. The other elements that I've already put in help sustain the illusion. Now with most of the painting filled, it's much easier to put in all these other small nuances. Make adjustments. Change the shape of something if it needs changing. And basically just wrap the whole thing up. The accents are going in on the moisture vaporizer. It's about time to put them in, since the picture needs to have more and more contrast placed in it in order for us to see it in the same way we look at the photograph. Now the ground in the foreground is still really bright. I have not made any adjustments to it yet. I'm still making adjustments to the things in the background. As I get those finished, I start noticing that the foreground is a distraction of sorts. It is very bright and consumes a great deal of the canvas. In order to reduce its importance and to make everything else feel balanced, I will have to cut it back a little bit. I'll have to put some shadows in it. Making the last few adjustments around in the area that we would call the focus, which has the broadest range of temperature between the warms and the cools. Filling in any other little holes, making sure that some of the distant elements are placed in. It's very easy to forget things when you're building a whole composition. And remember that everything needs to be in the picture in order for you to be able to make the right decisions for what you're building. Without most of the other elements in, whatever brushstrokes you put in first are all guesses. After those go in and more of the other elements get put in, you'll realize they either work or they need adjusting. And I would adjust them before you move on. Otherwise, you'll have a lot more to adjust at the end. All these little accents are really visible to the eye because all of the holes of distraction have been removed, with the exception of that little tiny blue hole in the shadow on the building of the right. I don't think I fill it at all in this picture. I have a few more accents to put in, and then I begin placing the foreground values. This is where we reduce the foreground and make it less important and it pushes the eye into the middle ground, which is where the moisture vaporizer and the doorway to the right are, basically the focus of the picture. Yeah, now with the foreground darkened, the picture really, the focus of the picture is center and center right, exactly where we want the eye to go. Now, if I had more time, I would make more and more adjustments to this until the focus is very specific in the picture. But since this is just a color study, it's an experimental color study for this, the sake of these demonstrations, I didn't want to get that far into it. And I don't think those details are as necessary since it's really about the big picture. All right, let me know if this kind of demonstration works for you with this kind of commentary. I'm going to be doing many more Gumroad videos, and I'm going to be building demonstrations of this sort for those videos. And if this works, especially for the commentary and what I'm talking about, again, please let me know, because these are the things that I'd like to discuss as the paintings are moving forward. Thank you for watching. Take care, and I'll see you in the next installation.